Welcome back, my timeline-transcending architect. Something absolutely mind-bending just unfolded that has observers experiencing vertigo about causality and time itself. They assumed you were newcomer to situation, recent arrival who just entered their established narrative. Yet as layers peel back, it's becoming apparent that the story they thought was theirs has actually been organized around you as central character since before they were even born, that what appeared to be you entering their world was actually them, finally becoming aware of narrative that's been structured around your role from inception, making their entire understanding of who's the protagonist and who's the supporting character completely inverted from what they assumed. This wasn't you inserting yourself into existing story. This was pre-written narrative with you as axis around which everything else was always meant to revolve, finally revealing itself to people who thought they were main characters when actually they've been playing roles in story that was written for you before their parts even existed on page. The architects have been monitoring narrative structure and temporal precedence phenomena across civilizations for eons, and they've identified what you're experiencing as retroactive centrality recognition when someone who appeared to be recent addition to established narrative is revealed to have been central, organizing principle all along, with everything that seemed to precede their arrival actually being set up for role they were always meant to play, making their arrival not entrance into existing story, but rather moment when story that was always theirs became visible to others who mistakenly thought narrative belonged to them. Most stories have clear chronological structure, where earlier characters establish narrative and later arrivals join existing plot. But your revelation demonstrates that apparent chronology can be illusion, where true narrative structure was organized around character, who seemed to arrive late, but was actually axis around which earlier elements were arranged from beginning. Watch what's happening as retroactive centrality becomes undeniable. Timeline confusion is spreading. People are reviewing events that seemed to occur before your arrival and recognizing those events now appear to have been laying groundwork for your role, as if past was being arranged to create conditions for story that was always about you, even when you weren't yet visible within it. Protagonist assumptions are collapsing. Those who thought they were main characters are experiencing existential disorientation as they realize they might have been supporting cast in narrative centered on you, that their important moments might have been set up for your arc rather than being meaningful in themselves. Some observers are experiencing prophetic interpretation. The sense that story was pre-written around you suggests destiny or fate, making your role feel cosmically significant rather than just socially constructed, triggering spiritual or mystical frameworks to explain how narrative could be organized around person before they appeared within timeline visible to others. The truly disorienting element is that you weren't manipulating or planning this revelation. You simply were who you always were, while story that was written around you gradually became visible to others, making their discovery of your centrality natural unfolding rather than strategic positioning. They thought you just arrived. Narrative layers revealed you were always the axis, and their entire understanding of story, timeline, and roles within it underwent complete inversion from assumption they'd been operating under when you appeared to be newcomer to their established world rather than being person, around whom their world was always structured from before they existed within it. Now the architects are analyzing what creates retroactive centrality recognition, and they're identifying what they call pre-narrative role encoding, when someone's function or purpose within larger story is established at level of story's structure itself, before that person appears within timeline, visible to other characters, creating situation where their role exists before their arrival and earlier events are actually preparation for entrance they haven't yet made from perspective of those experiencing story chronologically. Most roles are assigned during story. Characters enter, situations develop, roles emerge from interactions. But your role apparently was encoded into narrative structure from inception, existing as organizing principle before you, appeared within timeline that others were experiencing, making your late arrival actually reveal of central axis that was structuring story all along. Consider what pre-narrative role encoding means metaphysically. It suggests that stories or narratives might have existence independent of and prior to characters who play them out, that roles can be established at structural level waiting for right consciousness to fill them when timing aligns. It implies that apparent chronology of events might be surface phenomenon, while deeper narrative structure operates outside normal time, organizing what appears to be linear sequence according to patterns that transcend sequential unfolding visible to participants. Watch what pre-narrative role encoding reveals about your position. Your role was waiting for you. Narrative structure included your function before you appeared to fill it, suggesting match between who you are and role that was prepared, making your arrival not random chance but fulfillment of position that story required. Be filled by consciousness, matching specific parameters. Earlier events were your setup. Everything that seemed to precede you was actually preparation for your entrance, laying groundwork and creating conditions necessary for role you were meant to play, making chronologically prior events actually serve future purpose. They were structured to enable. Some studying narrative theory and storytelling recognize pre-narrative role encoding as sophisticated structural technique. In crafted stories, authors often establish character roles before introducing characters who will fill them, creating setup that only makes sense retroactively once character appears. Your situation suggests reality itself might employ similar narrative techniques, where roles exist structurally before being filled temporally. Others exploring determinism and fate note that if your role was encoded before your arrival, it raises questions about free will versus destiny. Were you always going to fill this role, or did you choose to step into position that was available but not guaranteed? This philosophical puzzle becomes practical when someone discovers their life was pre-structured around role they're now recognizing they've been playing or preparing to play. A few from quantum and consciousness perspectives suggest that if consciousness creates or influences reality, perhaps your consciousness at deeper level was actually organizing story that appears to have preceded you, making you author of narrative that seems to have existed before you from perspective of linear time but was actually being written by your consciousness operating outside temporal constraints others experience. The architects observe that pre-narrative role encoding is what creates retroactive centrality recognition. Your role wasn't assigned when you appeared but existed in story structure before your entrance, making everything that seemed to precede you actually serve purposes related to function you were always meant to fulfill. They thought you just arrived recently. Story reveals your role was encoded from inception, and chronology they experienced was surface phenomenon, while deeper narrative structure was always organized around you as axis that earlier events were preparing for even before you appeared within timeline visible to those who mistakenly thought story was theirs rather than being structured around you from before they existed within narrative they were experiencing as their own. Something powerful is spreading through observers now. What the architects call protagonist displacement vertigo, where people who assumed they were main characters experiencing painful disorientation from recognizing they might actually be supporting cast-in story centered on you, forcing fundamental identity reconstruction as they reconcile self-concept built on being central figure with evidence suggesting they've been playing supporting roles in narrative that was always about you. Most people experience themselves as protagonists of their own stories. Life feels like it's centered on them, with others as supporting characters, but your retroactive centrality revelation is forcing recognition that what felt like their story might actually be your story, with them as supporting cast, creating existential crisis about significance and centrality they'd assumed were inherent to their experience. Watch what Protagonist displacement vertigo creates psychologically. Self-importance is collapsing. They built identity around being central figure. Now evidence suggests they might be background characters or supporting cast in narrative, focused elsewhere, threatening ego investment in being most important person in their own story. Life meaning is destabilizing. Events they thought were significant in themselves now appear to have been significant as setup for your story, making their experiences feel less inherently meaningful and more functionally serving narrative they're not central to. Some are experiencing defensive denial, insisting they're still protagonists of their own stories, regardless of your centrality to larger narrative, protecting self-concept from threatening displacement by maintaining multiple protagonist framework where everyone is simultaneously central to their own story, even if they're supporting characters in yours. This rationalization preserves ego while acknowledging evidence of your centrality. Others are experiencing liberating relief, recognizing they're not central protagonist removes pressure to be hero of every story, allowing them to play supporting roles without feeling like they're failing at being main character. This reframe transforms protagonist displacement from threat into freedom because they can contribute meaningfully to story without bearing weight of being axis around which everything revolves. A few are investigating what made them assume protagonist status, recognizing their centrality was assumption rather than established fact. They're examining ego patterns that create protagonist perspective, making everyone feel like main character of reality when actually multiple narratives exist with different central figures. This self-examination reveals how consciousness creates protagonist experience regardless of actual role in larger story. Some are competing for protagonist status, refusing to accept supporting role. They're attempting to reassert centrality by claiming you're actually supporting character in their story, rather than accepting evidence of your narrative primacy. This competition reveals their psychological need to maintain protagonist to position, regardless of narrative evidence, suggesting different structure. Others are attempting to determine hierarchy. If you're protagonist and their supporting cast, what's their specific role and importance within your narrative? This leads to ranking themselves by proximity to you as central axis, creating new status hierarchy organized around narrative centrality rather than conventional measures of importance. The architects observe that protagonist displacement vertigo is most psychologically challenging aspect of retroactive centrality recognition, discovering your supporting character in story you thought was yours requires fundamental identity reconstruction, forcing reconciliation between protagonist self-experience that all consciousness generates and evidence, suggesting your actual role in larger narrative is supporting function in story centered on someone else who appeared to arrive late but was actually axis all along, around which earlier events including your own participation were structured from before you existed within narrative you were experiencing as being about you. Now the architects are revealing what the story has been written around you actually means mechanistically. You're experiencing what they call narrative convergence, synchronicity, where multiple independent storylines that seemed unrelated are all converging on you as focal point with timing and precision that suggests coordinated authorship rather than random coincidence, making your centrality visible through impossible coordination of factors that appear independent but are actually organized around you as axis. They were always meant to converge upon. Most convergence is explainable through traceable causes. People meet because they inhabit same spaces. Opportunities arise through understandable connections. Events relate through visible causal chains. But storylines converging on you apparently involve impossible coordination of independent factors, suggesting meta-level authorship organizing narrative from outside visible causality. Consider what narrative convergence synchronicity looks like. Practically, multiple people from completely different backgrounds with no connection to each other are all entering your life at same time, as if author of story decided this is moment when these characters needed to intersect around you despite no causal mechanism, connecting their arrivals, resources, and opportunities from independent sources are materializing simultaneously with timing that serves your narrative progression, despite no coordinator linking these separate developments. Information you need appears through multiple redundant channels at exact moment when narrative requires you have it, suggesting script-level coordination transcending normal information flow patterns. Watch what convergence pattern reveals about narrative structure. Independent storylines are organizing around you. People who thought they were in separate stories unrelated to yours are discovering their narratives were actually leading toward intersection with your arc all along, making them realize their seemingly independent journeys were actually approaches towards central axis you represent. Timing is impossibly precise. Convergences are occurring with synchronicity that probability calculations suggest shouldn't happen through chance alone, indicating coordination at level beyond what participants can orchestrate through normal means. Some studying synchronicity and meaningful coincidence recognize narrative convergence. Synchronicity as extreme form of phenomena Carl Jung described where events connect through meaning rather than through mechanical causality, storylines converging on you are linked through narrative purpose rather than through traceable causes, suggesting that reality includes meaningful connection dimension operating according to story logic rather than just physical causation. Others exploring complexity and emergence note that complex systems can produce coordinated behaviors without central coordinator through self-organization and feedback loops. Perhaps reality operates as self-organizing narrative system where your centrality creates a tractor that independent storylines naturally converge toward through emergent coordination rather than through conscious authorship, making convergence mechanistic rather than mystical while still producing appearance of pre-written story. A few from simulation and computational perspectives suggest that if reality is computational or simulated, then narrative convergence, synchronicity, might reflect story generation algorithms, coordinating independent threads around central characters when narrative structure requires convergence, making your experience evidence of underlying computational narrative architecture that generates story rather than just recording events. The architects observe that narrative convergence, synchronicity, is how pre-written story becomes visible. Independent storylines that seemed unrelated are revealed to be converging on you with impossible timing and coordination, suggesting meta-level authorship organizing narrative from outside visible causality. They thought storylines were independent. Convergence revealed organization around you as axis and impossible coordination of factors that appear independent but are actually structured to intersect around you, demonstrates that story was written with you as central organizing principle from before they existed within narrative they were experiencing as their own separate stories rather than as threads in larger story that was always about you. The architects are now analyzing emotional and identity implications of discovering your axis of pre-written story. You're experiencing what they call destiny weight integration, where recognizing that narrative was structured around you from before you appeared create sense of cosmic purpose or fated significance that's simultaneously empowering through validation of importance and burdensome through responsibility, implied by being axis around which story revolves. Most people live with assumption that life is series of choices or random events where meaning must be personally constructed, existing at level of story's structure itself, creating both validation that you matter objectively and pressure to fulfill purpose that narrative structure implies you're meant to serve. Watch what destiny weight integration requires psychologically. You must accept significance without ego, inflation. Recognizing your narratively central is validating but shouldn't create superiority complex, requiring ability to hold importance without losing humility or becoming grandiose about cosmic role you're discovering yourself within. You must embrace responsibility without being crushed. If story is structured around you, then choices and actions carry weight beyond personal consequences because they affect narrative others are participating in, creating responsibility that's meaningful but could become paralyzing if you let weight of cosmic purpose prevent authentic action. Some experiencing destiny weight integration find it empowering. Having story structured around them provides sense of purpose and direction that self-constructed meaning never achieved, making cosmic significance feel like coming home to role they were always meant to play, rather than like burden being imposed from outside. This positive integration allows them to step into centrality with confidence and grace. Others find destiny weight crushing, discovering their axis of pre-written narrative creates performance anxiety, where they feel they must live up to cosmic purpose they didn't ask for, making spontaneity difficult because everything feels like it should serve narrative function rather than being just lived experience. This negative integration can lead to paralysis or rebellion against role that feels imposed. A few are questioning whether destiny weight is real or projected, examining whether narrative structure that seems to exist objectively is actually pattern they're imposing retroactively, making them creator of significance they're experiencing as pre-existing structure. This reflexive questioning is healthy, but can prevent accepting genuine cosmic role if it becomes excuse to deny significance that's actually present. Some are attempting to refuse protagonist role, recognizing centrality but choosing not to accept responsibility or weight it implies, trying to be supporting character in narrative where they're actually axis because protagonist burden feels too heavy. But refusing clear role creates dysfunction where narrative pressure increases until they accept function they're meant to serve. Others are seeking guidance for fulfilling role, recognizing they're central to pre-written narrative creates desire to understand what story requires from them, what purpose their centrality serves, how to align with narrative function rather than working against or being unconscious of role they're meant to play. This seeking indicates mature integration, where they're accepting destiny weight while wanting to fulfill it well. The architects observe that destiny weight integration is necessary psychological work when recognizing retroactive centrality, discovering your axis of story written before you appeared creates both validation and burden that must be integrated healthily, accepting significance without inflation, while embracing responsibility without being crushed. They thought you just arrived. Story revealed you were always axis, and discovering narrative was structured around you from inception creates destiny weight requiring integration of cosmic significance into identity, previously built on assumption you were just participant, choosing your own meaning rather than central figure in pre-written story serving purposes that transcend personal construction of significance. Now something's emerging that the architects call timeline priority inversion. Recognition. Observers are realizing that before they existed doesn't just mean chronologically prior but suggests ontological priority, where your role in narrative structure has precedence that transcends temporal sequence, making you more fundamental to story than characters who appeared earlier in chronological unfolding, because narrative is structured around you at deeper level than temporal order represents. Most people assume chronological precedence equals narrative importance. Earlier means more fundamental. First means most significant. But your revelation demonstrates that narrative priority can invert chronological order, where later arrival is actually more fundamental than earlier appearance, because story structure itself is organized around axis that manifests within timeline. After elements it's organizing. Consider what timeline priority inversion means about reality's structure. It suggests that narrative or meaningful order might be more fundamental than chronological order, that story logic organizing events according to dramatic or purposeful structure is deeper reality than temporal sequence that appears on surface. It implies that apparent causality flowing from past to future might be surface phenomenon, while deeper causality flows from narrative structure toward temporal manifestation, making story-level organization the true cause that chronological sequence expresses, rather than chronological sequence being foundation that story emerges from. Watch what timeline priority inversion reveals about your position. You're structurally prior despite temporal lateness. Your role in narrative architecture precedes characters who appeared earlier chronologically, because structure is organized around functions and purposes, where your axis role is foundational. It's a story regardless of when you manifested within timeline. Earlier events serve your later arrival. What seemed chronologically prior was actually preparation for your entrance, making earlier temporally prior to you but narratively posterior, because earlier events exist to create conditions for your role rather than your role emerging from earlier events. Some studying philosophy of time recognize timeline priority inversion as validating certain metaphysical positions. If narrative priority can transcend temporal order, then time might not be as fundamental as experiential order suggests. That purposes and meanings organizing events might be more fundamental reality than chronological sequence through which purposes manifest. Others exploring causality and teleology note that timeline priority inversion suggests final causes might be more real than efficient causes, that your future function shapes past events more than past events determine your future, making causality flow backward from purposes toward their preparation, rather than just forward from causes toward their effects. A few from narrative and literary theory recognize timeline priority inversion, a sophisticated structural technique in crafted stories. Authors often create characters and events that seem foundational but are actually serving purposes related to later arrivals who are actually more central to narrative, even though they appear late in chronological unfolding. The architects observe that timeline priority inversion recognition reveals deepest level of your retroactive centrality. You're not just central character who arrived late but are structurally prior to elements that appeared chronologically earlier, making your role more fundamental to narrative than temporal sequence suggests, because story is organized at level where your axis function precedes its temporal manifestation. They existed chronologically before you appeared, but story was written around you before they existed, means your role has ontological or narrative priority, transcending temporal order, making you more fundamental to story than they are despite appearing later in chronological sequence. They were experiencing as establishing narrative foundation that your late arrival was entering rather than recognizing you as axis. Their earlier appearances were preparing for